Hello and welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show. I'm Tina Patterson and I'm really delighted with the guest that I have here for you today. She's Linda Bethea and it's really exciting because she has literally just been promoted to be the Chief Marketing Officer for the US business of Danone. And it's not a surprise because Linda has deep experience in marketing, over 20 years across various food and beverage businesses, including Diageo, Frito-Lay, and Pepsi. So welcome to the Outcomes Over Hours show, Linda.
Thank you, Tina. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to start hearing about you have had a rapid rise with your career. How has your leadership style changed over your career?
It's a great question. I think we all evolve as leaders as we move throughout our career. In fact, I just had the pleasure of joining a new leader training at Danone last week. And they asked that question, what's the hardest part about being a leader? And I think there is that inflection point in your career where you have to shift from doing the things that made you successful and got you promoted to then leading the team to do those things. And I think that's the most important role we play as leaders, is setting a very clear vision for the team and serving that leadership role, empowering them to do their jobs, removing obstacles that get in the way of doing their jobs, and really setting them up to be successful. But it's all about leading them to be successful. It's versus as an individual contributor, you're the one doing the work, grinding it out, executing with excellence to get promoted and move up the leadership chain. And as a leader, it's all about driving results through your people. So it's a big shift on, the business results versus the people results.
Oh, I love that. And I've actually reflected on this quite a bit because I completely agree with you. Individual contributors usually have their technical skills, their doing skills, their execution, and leadership is a very different skill set. So if you had someone who was new into whether it's a new leadership position of their a first-time leader or they've elevated up to the next level of leadership, what is the one thing that you would recommend that they think about as they go into their new leadership position?
I would say two things. One, get to know your team and your people. Nothing is more important than that. Again, your success is through your people. And so, really understanding who they are, their strengths, their opportunities, what motivates them, because that is different for everyone, is really going to be critical to success. And I think the other piece of it is really honing your own leadership skills. As I mentioned before, I view my key objectives as setting a very clear vision and removing obstacles, but I also need to be able to come in and be very clear in making decisions and preventing the swirl that can often happen in big companies. I've worked in mostly big companies my entire career, and the swirl is real. And I think some of the best leaders are the ones that are able to cut through that swirl, provide that clear direction, and make very clear decisions to keep things moving.
Oh, I love that. I am going to use that, the swirl. I haven't heard that before, but I agree with you. I partner with leadership teams in large global corporates, and decision making is something that often comes up. And we talk about, and I will use the phrase the swirl, but how often it's unclear who the decision maker is. And it's something so obvious that we don't necessarily always have in place. Is there any other advice on what you do to cut through the swirl and, to get to decision making and the right decision making in an effective way?
Well, I think you touched on it, right? There's the structural component and not being clear who the decision maker is. So I think clarifying that at the beginning of any process. Okay, who is going to be the key decision maker or decision makers for this project, whether it's a new packaging design, brand launch, advertising campaign, budget decision, understanding that from the very beginning of the process is key. And then if you are one of those key decision makers that have been appointed, I think understanding that you're never going to have all the information you need to make a
Yeah,
decision and
great
being
thought.
comfortable with that. I think a lot of leaders get paralyzed and they're insecure and worried that they're going to make the wrong decision. And that may happen. I've made a lot of wrong decisions in my career because we never have all the information at our fingertips.
Yeah.
But if you have 80% of the information, you have to be confident enough to move forward. Otherwise, you will get paralyzed, you'll get stuck, you'll cause that swirl with the team. And so you have to be willing to move, but then be really clear on how you're going to measure the outcomes of that decision and revisit it if needed. None of us are perfect. We're not going to bat 100 all the time, but being comfortable with failure and being comfortable with it, being able to say, hey, I made the wrong decision and here's how we're going to course correct. That's okay to do that as a leader. You don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And we all evolve. And one of the ways, obviously, we have evolved over the past few years is thinking through where we used to be in the office together all the time. Now, for most corporates, it's some form of hybrid. And I know that's the same for you and the team at Danone. And I'd love for you to share what are the 2 to 3 skills that you think that leaders need to amplify in our new normal? And if you think about the coming decade where your people aren't going to necessarily be in the office in front of you all of your office hours.
So I call it the leadership 3 C's. I think some of the most important skills to develop as a leader in this environment are curiosity, courage, and compassion. In terms of curiosity, obviously, as a marketer, that's core to who I am. I'm extremely curious about the consumer environment, consumer behavior, et cetera. But I think as leaders, you need to be just as curious about your team. Ask the questions to get to know them. As I mentioned earlier, know what their strengths are, what their opportunities are, but also who they are as people. What gets them excited to show up on your computer screen in the morning? What do they like to work on? What do they find challenging? Really get to know them by asking those questions, being curious about who they are professionally as well as personally. And then building on that, I think compassion is an underrated quality in a leader. At the end of the day, we are all people. We're all human beings, and we all have things going on outside of work that some of us are very comfortable sharing. I tend to be an oversharer and an open book with what's going on in my personal life, but other people aren't as comfortable sharing that. And it's really incumbent upon us as leaders to be compassionate and understand that there may be something going on that we don't know or we don't understand, and to give people the grace of that compassion before jumping to conclusions about their attitude or performance or comment they made in a meeting. And then my third one would be courage. I think it's very easy in the hybrid environment to hide behind your computer screen. And so how do you really make sure that you have the courage in that environment to speak up in a meeting? You may be on a screen with 30 other faces. How do you feel comfortable raising your hand, unmuting, and jumping in, and having the courage that may be a little bit different in a hybrid environment than it would be in person?
I love that. And I really love hearing you talk about compassion, because I very much part of the outcomes over ours philosophy is that we're not robots. To get the best out of the people that you work with, it's allowing them and enabling them to bring their whole selves to work, and to realize that people have got stuff going on outside of work, whatever that is. And sometimes that can be fabulous and it gives them the energy to be really productive. But often, and it's often more silent, that there are significant challenges that for a period of time can mean that it impacts their productivity. So I love hearing you say that, and the importance for leaders of linking the two so that their team feel engaged and empowered to be able to share what's going on, so that they can be truly a long-term employee through that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
People will be more engaged if they
Yeah.
feel like you have that compassion, that understanding, and they can bring their whole self to work.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And as you know, outcomes over hours is all about how can you work smarter? How can you be effective, efficient, and energetic? And I'd love to hear what's the most practical advice that you have taken to work smarter yourself?
So for me, it's very practical. I block out chunks of my calendar. So every situation is different, and what works for me is not going to work for someone else. So I also encourage people to talk to their team members, talk to their direct reports, and understand what works for them, because it's not one size fits all. For me personally, I'm a single mom of a 14-year-old girl, and I don't have a nanny. So everyone knows that my priority is driving her to school every day and picking her up from school every day. And I
Beautiful.
organize my calendar around that. So to your point of outcomes over hours, I don't work necessarily a 9 to 5 schedule because there are certain chunks of the day that I'm committed to being with my daughter. And so I work a very irregular schedule as a result of that, but I block it in my calendar so that everybody, and I communicate that. That's also important when you're setting boundaries, to communicate them. People can't respect your boundaries if they don't know them. So I block the chunks of time in my calendar and I communicate to my leadership team, to the teams that I work with the most closely, so they know that those are the hours to avoid when scheduling meetings. It's not always avoidable. There are absolutely times that I take meetings in the car, or I drop her off early at school because I have to get to an in-person meeting. But it's all about setting the intention and respecting the boundaries as much as possible.
Oh, I love that so, so much. People can't respect your boundaries if they don't know what they are. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, where I think people are having to unlearn that you don't have to be always on and always available. We all work hard, and that it's okay to have times where, no, right now I'm being a mom. That's what I am at that time. You know, the company gets me at a lot of other hours. Uh,
And
what
we have to normalize that as
yeah.
leaders. People that are in positions of privilege have to be the ones speaking out about that. So I'm very intentional about saying, hey, it's 3 o'clock. I have to leave now to go pick up Finley from school and take her to gymnastics. Or, hey, I'm going to be late to this meeting because I have to take Finley to the doctor, right? It should be okay to say those things. And it doesn't even have to be a parenting thing. I have a commitment. I joined a pickleball league and I have to leave because I have a pickleball game at 5 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
We need to normalize that it's okay to have a life outside of work, whatever that looks like.
I love that so much. And you're right, because a lot of leaders who I speak with, they say, well, it depends what my boss thinks is okay. And so for senior leaders to realize the position that they have is really critical, to your point, Linda, of normalizing this. And I also have a 14-year-old daughter. And when I would be in the office, I would leave loudly, which meant that exactly what you're saying. It would be, hey, everyone, I've got to go. I've got to pick up Eliza. And once again, this not so subtle cues of it's okay to have things outside of work. And actually, you know, that's what most people have got, whatever that looks like. So I love that so much. Well, Linda, I would love to finish up by asking you some rapid fire questions. Are you okay with that?
I'm ready. Fire away.
Okay. What is the best thing you've bought for under about $100 over the last few years?
Ooh, I'll give you two. On the practical side, it's absolutely my Amazon Prime membership because that helps me manage it all. I do all of my shopping online and that makes it super easy. On the non-practical side, it would be anything frivolous that I do that enables my daughter and I to spend quality time together, whether it's going out to brunch or getting our nails done, something fun like that.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what is the book that you have either recommended or gifted most to other people?
So mine is a bit of an obscure choice. It's called First You Have to Row a Little Boat. I grew up as a sailor, and this
Me too.
book is written by a sailor who basically applies all the lessons you learn in learning to sail to life. And so it's basically everything you need to know in life you can learn through learning to sail. And first, you have to row a little boat.
Oh, I love that. I'll look that one up. And finally, Linda, what does outcomes over hours mean to you?
I think it's everything we've discussed. It's going to look different for everyone, but for me, I absolutely love my job and I give it my all. But I also love being a mom. And for me, it's about finding ways to do both that don't compromise either. And so it may not look like somebody else's traditional hours, either FaceTime in the office or the 9 to 5, but I get my stuff done. I deliver the outcomes or exceed the outcomes that we need to drive the business, all while prioritizing what's important to me outside of work as well.
And that is exactly why you have just been promoted to be the Chief Marketing Officer for the US business. Well, Linda, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the Outcomes Over Hours show with me today.
Thanks for having me.